If you have a pension, HMRC treats you completely differently to almost every other retiree in Britain. Different from the person who saved purely into an ISA. Different from the person relying on the state pension alone. Different from the person with a big buy-to-let portfolio sitting in the background. And almost nobody, including a lot of accountants, properly explains what that actually means for your tax bill. Here's something to think about before we get into it. The old-style final salary pension, the one your parents might have had, guaranteed for life, rising with inflation, is disappearing fast. Most of you watching this are retiring, or about to retire, with a workplace or personal defined contribution pot sitting alongside your state pension. That combination is genuinely different to how retirement worked a generation ago, and almost none of the generic advice floating around online, on morning television, or in glossy pension provider brochures was actually written for how HMRC treats that combination in practice. I'm going to walk you through 6 things HMRC does differently once pension income enters your life. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why your pension changes the maths on your income tax, on where in the UK you choose to live, on the so-called stealth tax that's quietly dragging more pensioners into paying tax every single year, on how you draw your pension down without wrecking it, on the enormous inheritance tax change landing in April 2027, and on the annuity versus drawdown decision that a huge number of people get badly wrong. But before I get into any of it, I want to ask you something. Drop a comment right now, this second, and tell me one thing. Are you already drawing your pension, or are you still building it up? Just type drawing or building. That's it. The reason I'm asking is simple. The comments on this video tell me exactly what to make next. If most of you are still working towards retirement, that's one video. If most of you are already in drawdown and trying to fix things, that's a completely different video. 2 seconds of your time, and I promise I read every single one. Before I go any further, I have to be clear about something. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not an accountant. I am not authorized or regulated by the FCA. Nothing in this video is regulated financial advice of any kind. These are educational examples based on current tax rules and publicly available information from HMRC and gov.uk. Always speak to a regulated financial advisor or a qualified accountant before making decisions about your own pension. My name doesn't matter as much as this. This is Retired UK, and this channel exists for one specific group of people. Retirees and people approaching retirement in the UK who want to understand how the system actually works. Not the simplified version your workplace pension provider sent you in a leaflet. Not the confident-sounding opinion your neighbor gave you down the pub. The real version, with real numbers, explained in plain English on a whiteboard, so you can actually follow it. If that sounds like you, hit subscribe right now, because what I'm putting out next week is going to be one of the most important videos I've made on this channel. Now let's start with the thing that surprises pension holders the most. Number 1. HMRC treats almost all of your pension income as fully taxable, exactly the same as a salary. People assume that because they spent 30 or 40 years paying into their pension, some of that money must come back out tax-free. It doesn't work that way, apart from one specific exception. When you first start accessing a defined contribution pension, you're normally entitled to take 25% of the pot as a tax-free lump sum, up to the current allowance. That's it. That's the one-off tax-free bit. Everything after that, every drawdown payment, every annuity income payment, every defined benefit pension payment for the rest of your life, is taxed as ordinary income, at your marginal rate, in exactly the same tax bands as if you were still going into work every day. Here's what that looks like with real numbers. Say your pension pays you £24,000 a year on top of the full new state pension, which now sits a little above £11,500 a year. Add those together, and you're at roughly £35,500 of taxable income before you've touched an ISA, before you've earned a penny of savings interest anywhere else. Once you're above the personal allowance of £12,570, everything above that is taxed at 20%. Push past £50,270 in combined income, and the portion above that jumps to 40%. Most people picture their pension landing in the bank the way their ISA does, completely untouched, theirs to keep. It isn't. That gap between what people expect and what actually lands is where the shock hits, and it hits every single year, not just once. Quick pause. Drop a comment and tell me, did you realize that only 25% of your pension pot comes out tax-free, and the rest is taxed exactly like a wage? Yes or no? I want to know how many of you are hearing this for the first time. Number 2. Where you live in the UK changes your pension tax bill more than most retirees ever consider. Most people think about geography and tax purely in terms of council tax bands, or maybe stamp duty if they're moving house. But since income tax was partially devolved, Scotland now runs its own set of income tax bands, and they are meaningfully different from the rest of the UK. In Scotland there are more bands, and the higher rates start earlier than they do in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. A retiree in Scotland with £45,000 of combined pension and state pension income can end up paying a noticeably higher rate on part of that income than someone with the exact same income living just south of the border. This isn't a rounding error you can ignore. Over a 20 or 25-year retirement, a few £100s a year in extra tax compounds into a genuinely large number. We're talking thousands of pounds over a retirement, sometimes more, depending on your income level. Same pension, same lifestyle, different postcode, a meaningfully different outcome. If you're weighing up where to retire, perhaps closer to family in Scotland versus staying put in England, this is a real, calculable factor that almost nobody puts into their spreadsheet before they move. Number 3. HMRC has been quietly pulling more pensioners into paying tax than at almost any point in decades, and it isn't because tax rates went up. This is the part almost nobody explains properly. Since 2021, the personal allowance, the amount of income you can earn before paying any income tax at all, has been frozen at £12,570. It was originally designed to rise with inflation every single year. It hasn't moved. Meanwhile, the state pension keeps rising under the triple lock, which guarantees it increases each year by whichever is highest out of average earnings growth, inflation, or 2.5%. Do you see the collision coming? The state pension is rising every year. The tax-free personal allowance is standing completely still. For years now, those two lines have been getting closer and closer together, and for a growing number of pensioners relying heavily on the state pension plus even a modest private pension, they've now crossed. This is what's often called fiscal drag. Nobody voted for a tax rise, nobody announced one, but more and more pensioners are being pulled into paying income tax simply because the threshold hasn't kept pace. If your pension income has crept up over the last few years, and you suddenly find yourself paying tax you never used to pay, this frozen allowance is very likely the reason, not some dramatic change in the rules. Number 4. Because your pension is fixed, guaranteed income, the way you should think about ISAs and drawdown is completely different from someone without one. For a retiree with no pension at all, living entirely off an ISA or savings, the priority is usually caution. Don't run the pot down too fast. Keep some safety margin. But if you have guaranteed pension income, whether that's a state pension plus a workplace pension or a defined benefit pension covering most of your fixed costs, the calculation flips. Your fixed expenses, housing, utilities, food, insurance, are already being covered by guaranteed income that arrives whether the stock market goes up or down. That changes what the rest of your money is for. Money sitting in drawdown or in an ISA that you don't need for survival can afford to take on more risk because you're not relying on it to keep the lights on. Yet a huge number of retirees keep their entire drawdown pot in ultra-cautious, low-growth funds, treating it as if it's their safety net. it isn't. Your pension is the safety net. Your drawdown pot and your ISA are the opportunity fund. For holidays, for gifts to grandchildren, for a new kitchen, for a buffer against a care cost down the line. Being overly cautious with money you don't actually need for day-to-day survival often means leaving growth on the table for safety you already have from somewhere else entirely. There's a tax angle layered on top of this too. Withdrawals from a drawdown pot are taxable income on top of your pension and state pension. ISA withdrawals are completely tax-free, no matter how much you take out, no matter what tax band you're in. So the order in which you draw from these two pots matters enormously. Drawing from your ISA first in a year, when your pension income has already pushed you close to the 40% higher rate threshold, can save you a genuinely significant amount of tax, simply by choosing which pot to dip into first. Number 5. Big changes are coming to how pensions are treated for inheritance tax, and if you don't know about them, they could catch your family out. Historically, unused pension pots sat outside your estate for inheritance tax purposes. If you died with money still in your pension, it generally passed to your beneficiaries free of inheritance tax, which made pensions one of the most efficient ways to pass on wealth in the UK. From April 2027, that changes. Unused pension funds and death benefits are being brought into the scope of inheritance tax, meaning they'll be added to the value of your estate when working out whether inheritance tax is due. For a lot of people, this is a genuinely enormous shift in planning. If you've been deliberately keeping your ISA and other savings topped up while leaving your pension untouched, on the assumption it would pass to your children tax-free later, that strategy needs revisiting well before April 2027. It doesn't mean pensions stop being useful. They're still hugely tax-efficient during your lifetime. But the old advice of spend your ISA first, leave the pension for last so it skips inheritance tax no longer holds the way it used to. If this applies to you, this is exactly the kind of thing worth sitting down with a regulated financial advisor about well before the change lands, not after. Quick break again. Drop a comment and tell me, did you already know about the April 2027 pension inheritance tax change? Yes or no? I want to see how many people are hearing this for the first time, because I don't think it's had nearly enough coverage. Number 6, and the biggest one. The annuity versus drawdown decision shapes your entire retirement, and most people make it based on the wrong question. When you access a defined contribution pension, you generally have a choice. You can buy an annuity, hand over some or all of your pot to an insurance company in exchange for a guaranteed income for the rest of your life. Or you can keep the pot invested and draw an income from it yourself, known as drawdown, keeping full control over how much you take and when. Most people and most YouTube videos frame this purely as a returns question. Will drawdown grow faster than an annuity pays out? Will you live long enough to make the annuity worth it? But there's a tax and flexibility dimension to this decision that gets far less attention and matters just as much. With an annuity, your income is fixed and fully taxable every single year for the rest of your life, on top of your state pension. You cannot defer it. You cannot reduce it in a year when you want to stay under a tax threshold. You cannot accelerate it in a year when it makes sense to take more. It simply arrives, fully taxable, year after year, whether or not that suits your tax position. With drawdown, you control the timing. You can take less in a year when your income is already high, keeping yourself under the higher rate threshold. You can take more in a year when you have other deductions or lower income elsewhere. You can manage which tax year withdrawals fall into. You can leave money invested for growth in years you don't need it. Annuity rates have genuinely improved over the last couple of years compared to where they were previously, which has brought annuities back into serious consideration for a lot of retirees who'd written them off. But the tax control that drawdown offers is not something an annuity can ever replicate. Once you've signed the contract, that flexibility is gone for good. As with the American lump sum decision, the answer usually isn't pick one or the other. A hybrid approach, using part of your pot to buy an annuity that covers your essential fixed costs, and keeping the rest in drawdown for flexibility and tax planning, gives you guaranteed security for your needs and tax control for everything else. Very few people are ever told this is even an option. Ask your pension provider directly. Now let me bring all 6 of these together, because they don't sit in isolation. They interact constantly. Your pension income is fully taxable, so the tax hit is bigger than most people expect going in. Where you live in the UK genuinely changes your after-tax outcome, sometimes by thousands of pounds over a retirement. The frozen personal allowance is quietly pulling more and more pensioners into paying tax every year, without a single headline tax rise ever being announced. Your drawdown and ISA strategy should be built around the fact that your guaranteed pension already covers your baseline needs, freeing up the rest of your money to work harder. The April 2027 inheritance tax change means the old spend the ISA, save the pension playbook needs a serious rethink. And the annuity versus drawdown decision should be made on tax flexibility and guaranteed security together, not purely on projected returns. Here's the practical reality. If you have a pension, the standard, generic retirement advice you read online does not fit you the way it fits someone living purely off an ISA. The frozen personal allowance was not designed with you specifically in mind, but it is affecting you regardless. The April 2027 inheritance tax change was not built around your existing plan, but it will touch it whether you've reviewed it or not. You need a framework built specifically around guaranteed income, and the foundation of that framework is genuinely simple. Match your fixed, essential expenses against your fixed, guaranteed income, your state pension, and any defined benefit or annuity income. Once your needs are covered by guaranteed money, the rest of your pot is free to be used more flexibly and taxed more efficiently than most people realize. So here's what I want you to actually do with this. First, if you're still working towards retirement, find out exactly what choices you'll have with your pension, how much tax-free cash you're entitled to, whether an annuity or drawdown option is available to you, and what your provider's rules actually are. Most people never ask until it's too late to plan properly. Second, if you're within 5 years of retiring, sit down with a regulated financial advisor who understands pension taxation properly, not someone trying to sell you a product. Bring your pension statements, your state pension forecast, and a rough idea of where you want to live. Ask them to model the next 20 years, not just the next 2. Third, don't assume everything will simply sort itself out. HMRC does not send you a letter explaining that you're paying more tax than you need to. They are, unsurprisingly, quite happy to keep collecting. And here's the comment I really want from you on this video. Tell me which of the 6 things surprised you the most. Was it the frozen personal allowance quietly pulling more pensioners into tax? Was it the Scotland versus rest of UK tax difference? Was it the April 2027 inheritance tax change on pensions? Was it the annuity versus drawdown flexibility point? Whatever it was, just drop the number 1 through 6 in the comments. That number tells me exactly what to cover in more depth next. If this video helped you, hit the like button. It takes 1 second, and it tells YouTube to put this in front of more UK retirees who genuinely need to hear it. And if you know someone approaching retirement with a pension coming, a friend, a sibling, a parent, send them this video. 20 minutes now could save them a genuinely large amount of money and a lot of stress later on. And if you're not subscribed yet, do it now, because next week's video is for the exact people who commented building on this one. The people with a pension coming who want to plan it properly before it even starts. I'll see you in the next one.